Okay, so I've waited a long time for this camera. It is the Facecam Neo from Elgato, and today we're gonna finally unbox it and take a closer look at what it is, how well it works, and if it's the best $100 webcam right now. Let's go. Alright, so let me explain the long wait. So I ordered this camera from Amazon on May 1st, pretty much right after it was announced. And I'm not affiliated or sponsored with Elgato in any way. I used my own money to buy the webcam. So I'll try to be authentic and comprehensive with my review. And I've tested around 100 webcams, as you can see on this channel, and it's because what I like to do in my free time, as sad as that sounds. So I'll start with the unboxing. So the box looks like, well, it was designed as a no-frills, highly recyclable package. In the box, you'll find just the camera and its monitor mounting bracket, and not even any documentation or even any peels for the camera to kind of protect the lens. Now, I'm a bit biased, but I'm also a huge fan of the white and black kind of stormtrooper color scheme. My whole desk and my chair and everything in my office is like that. The field of view is kind of in the sweet spot of 77 degrees, so it's close to how a 35mm full frame camera looks. And it won't narrow your face like a wider frame 90-degree field of view webcam will often do. And it shoots up to 1080p with 60 frames per second, so it's not 4K. But most of the time, to be honest, 4K, especially in webcams, is not what it's cracked up to be. I'm actually a huge believer in 1080p with 60 frames per second. I'm even filming that typically with my larger cameras with APS-C and full frame cameras that are capable of filming in 4K 30 or 4K 60. So for optics, it's got a 1/2.9-inch sensor, so it's kind of respectable, but not a huge sensor, and it has an f2.0 aperture. And while that aperture might sound like a nice low value for an APS-C or a full frame camera, it's not going to give you any background blur or bokeh effect unless you're doing that with software. It does have an autofocus set of optics though, which is an improvement basically over the Facecam Mk2. And the cable is about 4.5 feet or almost 1.5 meters, and it terminates to USB-C. So if you only have a USB-A, you're going to need to buy an adapter, which are usually about $5 on Amazon. Now the monitor mount is actually pretty cool with the transparent front overhang, so it won't cover up the pixels on the thin bezel monitors that you might have, for example. So there's also a nice shutter control that's on the top this time versus the Facecam Mk2 or the detachable one in the Mark 1. That's going to make it so it's less risky in terms of getting fingerprints on the front of the camera. The mount is attached via a 1/4-20 thread, so you can use it with tripods. And the mount itself kind of mounts like a proper tripod would, or proper budget tripod would, with a normal camera with this kind of almost wing nut-like screw that you kind of hinge down, tighten, and then put it back up. Now the mount itself can be hinged downwards, so you can get those top-down desk shots, and it can be pivoted from side to side because it's just on that 1/4-20 mount. There's a bit of a friction foot there, so it doesn't pivot too easily when it's pretty tight. So one downside or upside, as you might think of, depending on what your opinion is of webcams and their microphones, is that it does not have a built-in microphone, not even a bad one built in. So you do need to have a separate microphone. And honestly, if you're using this for streaming, creating videos, remote meetings, or in education, I've tested very few webcam microphones with usable audio capture. So in terms of bad microphones and webcams, there are things that can save them, like if you use Adobe Podcast AI, for example, to treat the audio after you filmed it, because from a physics perspective, the microphone in a webcam is just too far away from your mouth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hook this up now and get my framing right and show you the default image first from the Facecam Neo, but stick around because I'm going to optimize it and then show you what I did using Elgato's Camera Hub software. Alright, so this is the Elgato Facecam Neo with complete default settings out of the box, no tweaks, no tunes, and the audio is coming from my Shure dynamic microphone because the webcam doesn't have a microphone. I'll just test the 60 frames per second so you can see how smooth the frame rate is. All right, so now you've seen the default image. In my opinion, it's a little bit out of focus on my hairline and a bit bluish. I think the, the white balance is a bit low in terms of the auto white balance values. So what I'm going to do is update that in the Camera Hub app. And by the way, if you've already got Camera Hub or anything else for the prompter, for your cam links, for a Facecam Mark 1 or Mark 2, you're going to want to update it and make sure it's got the latest updates to it so that it can control the Facecam Neo because it's a relatively new camera. All right, so these are the tune settings for the Facecam Neo from Elgato. Just to go through a couple of the things that I did there. So you can see I've got the Camera Hub open. I have Elgato Facecam Neo selected as my source. It's at 1080p 60. And I've also got the zoom field of view just set to 100%. It'll do face tracking if you use it with a graphics card. You can also set presets if you want to do different frames with it. I don't really recommend that on a 1080p camera unless you know you can punch into certain areas or you're going to do it small on your screen on a stream or something. For focus, though, I turned off automatic focus. You could see a little bit in the previous shot that my hair was a bit out of focus, and there is something weird going on with my hair in a second that I'll talk about in this particular case. I'm not sure if it's just me or my camera or my hair, but something funny is going on in terms of this kind of glow around my hairline, which is not natural. Like, I don't have red on my scalp in real life. It's just kind of put that there weirdly, like a strange glow. The exposure, automatic exposure, I turned that off, and then I set shutter speed from 1/60 as the default to 1/90. That made it look a little bit more natural. ISO I set to 233. I played around a bit with that. And then the white balance, because it was a bit too on the blue side, I set that to 5100 kelvins. It was around 4500 kelvins or something out of the box with the automatic settings, so this looks a bit better. Again, the weirdest part for me was this kind of hairline thing. If you look at my Sony camera when I come back, I don't have that. It looks like I've dyed my hair or something with the way that the camera is capturing, but that's not reality. That's not actually what my lighting is showing. I've tried different saturation settings, everything else, and I don't know exactly what's going on there. Otherwise, I would say the image looks pretty good with a few tweaks that I made to it. I think my skin tones and everything look natural. Again, the motion is really good at 1080p with 60 frames per second. Again, this is the Elgato Facecam Neo. Alright, so there you have it. The Facecam Neo with some tweaked settings. I got it to look a little better in most respects, but as you saw, it kind of weirdly wanted to make me a ginger, and you can tell, like, if you look at my hairline here with my Sony camera, I don't have any of that kind of red glow in my hair. Again, it looks like the natural color, which is more of a sandy blonde, brownish color naturally. So it kind of did something weird with my hair, and I'm not sure if that, again, if that was just me or my hair or my specific camera, but it was odd. So I would say, and the rest of it though was quite good. Once you dialed it in, I did have to set the noise kind of reduction on the background. I realized it was a bit noisy when you didn't do that, to medium. But I thought the image and the skin tones and everything else and the, the fluidness of motion and everything was very good for that camera. And I think it is a good value at $100, but I would at least test your, make sure your hair doesn't look weird like mine did, or maybe, keep fiddling. I fiddled with a lot of the settings with saturation and white balance and turning on and off auto exposure. I didn't have any like weird AR or VR kind of filters turned on from my graphics card or anything like that, because there are effects that you can do through the NVIDIA Broadcast SDK. Nothing like that was turned on. The HDR wasn't really usable. It just kind of flattened everything and made it so bright that I didn't even want to show it in the end because it was kind of not usable. Like a lot of webcams, HDR, or the wide range setting in that case, do. So even though it's kind of a checkbox, I think, for most webcams to have HDR, I don't think it's usable on probably at least 80% of the webcams that I've tried, and sometimes it even messes up your background lighting. Speaking of which, I did have to take my background lighting when I went into the Facecam Neo By default, they kind of went to a bit of a purple hue, which might have something to do with that hair tone, and I had to kind of set them to a bit more of a green hue in order to get them to look white again, like 5500 Kelvin kind of lights should look like they look on my Sony cameras and other cameras that have nice center metering and good white balance. So what's my overall verdict on the Facecam Neo? I would say it's worth the $100. You can dial it in and get it pretty good in terms of motion. I'd say it's really worth it if you have aspirations to look a little bit like a ginger in terms of your hair tones, assuming that's just not one weird bespoke problem with mine. But yeah, it was a good camera otherwise, and I think a good value at $100 because it can produce a nice 1080p 60 image. I like the kind of, even though it's a bit plasticky, the form factor, the black and white Stormtrooper color of it. I like the cables braided, so it's a nice quality cable off the back of it. The software from Elgato is very feature rich, so it's very good in terms of the software, just with that one oddity of the camera. Otherwise, everything else kind of lines up and it is good. So if you liked this review, give me a like. Otherwise, subscribe to my channel for more reviews like this. And as always, we'll see you soon.